During his wife's funeral, the millionaire stood motionless before the closed casket. It was drizzling. The sky seemed to weep along. Suddenly, a barefoot girl in tattered clothes approached and whispered, "She's alive, and she's hiding." What followed would forever change both their lives. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. The rain fell softly on the cemetery that autumn afternoon. Delicate droplets collided with the millionaire's black umbrella, creating a melancholic symphony that echoed his silent grief. Motionless before the mahogany casket, he kept his eyes fixed on the closed surface that now held, according to everyone, the body of the only person he had ever truly loved in his entire life. The man's face, once etched with lines of determination that intimidated entire boardrooms, now displayed only emptiness. His expression was that of someone who had lost not just someone, but an essential part of himself. His hands, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar deals without the slightest tremor, now fidgeted slightly with each breath he took. "Friends and family, you may approach for a final farewell," the pastor announced in a solemn voice. The millionaire remained, still as executives, politicians, and socialites paraded around the casket, murmuring empty condolences. Each word sounded like a distant echo. Nothing mattered. His financial empire, his properties around the world, his private jets, everything seemed terribly insignificant now. A few yards away, partially hidden behind an old oak tree, a small figure watched the ceremony. A girl of approximately 7 years old, with tangled hair and worn clothes, kept her wide eyes fixed on the casket. Her bare feet sank into the damp earth, but she didn't seem to care. Her thin body trembled, not just from the cold, but from something that seemed to churn inside her. "Mr. Sterling, we need to wrap things up. The storm's rolling in," informed his personal assistant, lightly touching the millionaire's shoulder. It was then that the man finally took a step forward. He took a small jewel from his pocket, a sapphire pendant he had given his wife on their first anniversary. With trembling fingers, he placed it on the casket. "No one will ever know who you truly were," he whispered, as a lone tear trickled down his face, hardened by years of tough negotiations. The sky darkened suddenly, and the wind increased in strength, as if nature responded to the weight of that moment. The guests began to scatter hurriedly, seeking shelter in their luxury cars. The millionaire, however, remained motionless, letting the now heavier rain soak his impeccable Italian suit. It was in that instant that he felt it, a small hand gripping the hem of his coat with surprising strength. He looked down and saw the girl, large, deep, and frighteningly serious eyes, staring up at him. "She's alive, and she's hiding," the child whispered in a hoarse voice, as if she wasn't used to speaking. The security guard, noticing the girl's approach, moved quickly to intervene. "Get away from him, kid," he ordered, reaching out to remove her. But the millionaire raised his hand in a curt gesture, instantly paralyzing the security guard. Something in the child's voice, in the intensity of her gaze, had pierced the wall of grief that isolated him from the world. The days following the funeral passed in a blur for the millionaire, Michael Sterling. The emergency meetings with shareholders, the property transfer documents, the looks of false sympathy, everything seemed to happen in a parallel reality, separated from him by an impenetrable fog. Sitting in his corner office on the top floor of the tallest skyscraper in the city, Sterling contemplated the metropolis that stretched out at his feet. The lights of the buildings shone against the night sky, forming a mosaic of life and activity that contrasted dramatically with the emptiness he felt inside. "The papers are ready for your signature, Mr. Sterling," informed his secretary, placing a folder on the mahogany desk. "Your brother-in-law is waiting in the lobby." The millionaire didn't respond immediately. His thoughts were stuck on that rainy afternoon, on the words of the unknown girl. He couldn't forget them, no matter how hard he tried to convince himself that they were just the ramblings of a disturbed child. "Sir," the secretary insisted. "Tell him to wait," he finally replied, swiveling his chair to face the woman. "And find Felix. I need him immediately." Felix, his private investigator, arrived. Less than half an hour later, a discreet, middle-aged man with watchful eyes that seemed to register every detail of the environment. He had worked for the Millionaire for over a decade, solving problems that money alone couldn't fix. "I need you to find someone," Sterling said without preamble. "A girl, approximately 7 years old, dark, tangled hair, probably lives on the streets. She was at the cemetery during the funeral." Felix didn't show surprise. He simply took a small notebook from his pocket and began to take notes. "Any distinguishing features?" The Millionaire hesitated. Her eyes, big, almost like hers. The comparison escaped before he could contain it, and she knew things no one should know. For 2 nights, Felix scoured the streets of the city, the shelters, the communities under the overpasses. On the 3rd dawn, his message arrived. "Found her." The driver steered the limousine through the narrow streets of one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. The Millionaire, who rarely left the comfort of his privileged spaces, watched through the dark window a world that seemed to belong to another planet. Children playing amidst the garbage, elderly people sitting in broken chairs on the sidewalk, walls covered in desperate graffiti. Finally, the vehicle stopped in front of a small, abandoned square. Felix was already there, talking to an elderly woman who seemed to carry the weight of many lives on her hunched back. "She's over there," the investigator pointed out as the Millionaire approached. Under that awning, a few yards away, partially hidden in the shadows of an abandoned building, the girl was sitting on a piece of cardboard. She tightly hugged a worn teddy bear, almost without stuffing, keeping her eyes fixed in their direction, as if she were expecting them. "The old woman found her sleeping in a cardboard box almost a year ago," Felix explained, indicating the elder lady. "Has taken care of her since then. There are no documents, no official records. She calls her just Little One." The Millionaire approached slowly, fearing to frighten her. When he was just a few feet away, the girl looked up. There was no fear in her eyes, only a strange certainty, as if this encounter were predestined. "You came," she said simply. The man crouched down before the child, ignoring the dirt that stained his $5,000 suit. "How did you know her?" he asked directly, without specifying who he was talking about. "It wasn't necessary." The girl hugged the bear tighter. "She used to come see me. She brought food and stories." Her large eyes softened with the memory. "She said she would take me home someday, that she just needed to take care of something first." The Millionaire felt his heart race. His wife had never mentioned visits to this part of town, never spoken about a child on the streets. Why would she keep such a secret? "What else did she tell you?" The girl looked around as if checking to see if they were being watched, and then pulled something from the torn pocket of her dress, a folded and crumpled piece of paper. With almost reverent care, she held it out to the man. It was a fragment of a letter, partially torn. He would recognize the handwriting anywhere, the delicate strokes, slightly inclined to the right, the particular way she drew her capital. Letters. And there, in faded blue ink, was his wife's name, followed by words that made his blood run cold. "We need to hide her. They found out." "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "She left it with me. She said it was important, that if something happened..." The girl's voice failed. A single tear ran down her dirty face. "That night, the black car came. They took her. She was screaming." The world around the Millionaire seemed to spin. The girl's words, the fragment, of the letter, the secrets his wife had apparently kept. It all mixed together in his mind, forming a picture too terrible to contemplate. But amidst the whirlwind of doubts, one certainty began to crystallize. The casket he had buried 3 days ago might be empty. The millionaire, Michael Sterling, locked himself in his private study in the mansion for hours, refusing to answer calls or receive visitors. His world, already shattered by the supposed death of his wife, now crumbled under the weight of the terrible possibilities that the girl's revelations had opened up. The bottle of scotch, previously sealed in the bar, was now half empty on the desk. The glass between his fingers trembled slightly as he contemplated the fragment of the letter the child had given him. The words on that piece of paper were like knives that pierced his conscience. "We need to hide her." They found out. Who were they? What had they found out? And above all, why would his wife, the woman with whom he had shared 15 years of life, keep such secrets? A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Sterling," the housekeeper called timidly, "your brother-in-law is here. He insists on seeing you. He says it's about the company documents." The millionaire swallowed the last gulp of scotch, feeling the liquid burn his throat. His brother-in-law, his wife's younger brother, had taken over the administrative negotiations since the announcement of her death. Always efficient, always solicitous, perhaps too efficient, he thought now, with growing distrust. "Send him in," he ordered, quickly stashing the fragment of the letter in the desk drawer. The brother-in-law entered with decisive steps. A man in his 40s, impeccably dressed, with the gold watch he flaunted on every occasion gleaming on his wrist. "Finally," he exclaimed, forcing a tone of concern. "We're all worried. You've disappeared for 2 days. There are urgent decisions to be made." The millionaire watched him silently, noticing details that would have gone unnoticed before. The slight nervous twitch in the corner of his eye, the way he avoided looking directly at him, the subtle perspiration on his forehead despite the air-conditioned environment. "What did the body look like?" he asked abruptly. The brother-in-law blinked, visibly confused. "I'm sorry, the body of my wife, your sister." The millionaire rose slowly, walking around the desk. "You identified her at the morgue, correct? While I was in Tokyo, you were the one who insisted that the casket be sealed due to the state of the body after the accident." "Yes, of course." The brother-in-law adjusted his tie. "It was terrible, unrecognizable, really. I spared you that trauma. Why are you asking this now?" The millionaire walked to the large window that overlooked the immaculate gardens of the property. Outside, life continued its natural course. The flowers bloomed, the birds sang, indifferent to the storm that was brewing within him. "I've been thinking. It was all very fast, don't you think? The accident on the coastal highway, the body recovered, the funeral organized in less than a week." "It's what she would have wanted," the brother-in-law replied promptly. "No unnecessary prolonging of the pain. But I don't understand where you're going with this." The millionaire turned, facing the man intensely. "What do you know about a child? A girl that my wife used to visit in the slums." The change was subtle, but undeniable. A flicker of panic crossed the brother-in-law's eyes, quickly masked by an expression of confusion. "What are you talking about? My sister didn't frequent such places. You must be confusing things. Grief sometimes plays tricks on us." "I'm not confusing anything," the millionaire interrupted, his voice hardening. "There's a lot I don't know about my own wife. Apparently, things she was hiding, people she was protecting." The brother-in-law took a step back, as if the words were physically or emotionally too sharp. In his coat pocket, a phone vibrated. He checked it with a quick movement, and the millionaire noticed how his expression changed for a moment. "I need to go?" the brother-in-law announced, already moving towards the door. "Obviously, you still need time. The documents can wait a few days. Take care of yourself, please." Before the millionaire could insist, the man had already left, leaving behind only the echo of hurried footsteps in the marble hallway. That same night, the millionaire received a call from Felix. "Mr. Sterling, I checked the accident records. As requested, there are inconsistencies." The man's heart raced. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "The police report mentions that the vehicle was found charred at the bottom of a cliff. The body, supposedly recognized by jewelry and documents, in the purse found near the wreckage. But there are no photos of the body on file, nor are there any detailed autopsy results. Just a certificate signed by the medical examiner with the cause of death. Multiple trauma resulting from a car accident. The identification was made by your brother-in-law, who insisted on the immediate release of the body." The millionaire closed his eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. "There's more," Felix continued. "I discreetly spoke with a security guard at the clinic where your wife was being treated for insomnia. He mentioned seeing her being taken to a restricted wing 2 days before the supposed accident." "What clinic is that?" "Havenbrook Institute for Mental and Emotional Disorders. Your wife was attending therapy sessions there weekly, according to their records." The millionaire felt as if the ground was giving way beneath his feet. His wife had never mentioned therapy sessions, let alone at an institute specializing in mental disorders. "Felix, find that girl again. Bring her here and keep investigating the institute. I want to know everything about this place." Hanging up, the millionaire approached the bookcase where he kept their wedding photographs. In the silver frame, his wife's radiant smile now seemed to hold secrets he had never suspected. Who was the woman he had married, really? And more importantly, was she really dead? The guest room farthest from the main part of the mansion was prepared with the utmost care. Soft sheets, new toys, clothes of approximately the girl's size. The millionaire supervised every detail personally, much to the surprise of the staff, who had never seen him so involved in domestic matters. "She might be overwhelmed by so much luxury," the housekeeper warned, adjusting a giant teddy bear on the bed. "Kids who've been living on the streets are often wary of sudden changes." The millionaire nodded, absorbing the observation. It was unfamiliar territory for him, the world of children, especially vulnerable ones. Throughout his adult life, he had dedicated himself exclusively to business, always postponing the moment of having children. His wife had never pressured him, also seeming comfortable with life as a couple. Now reflecting on it, he realized how many conversations they had never had, how many silences he had accepted without questioning. The sound of the doorbell at the intercom interrupted his thoughts. "They've arrived, sir," the butler announced. Felix entered first, gently holding the girl's hand. She seemed even smaller in the grand environment of the entrance hall, her wide eyes scanning the crystal chandeliers and the imposing staircases. The elderly woman who cared for her had also come, bringing a small bundle with the child's few belongings. "What is this place?" the girl asked, her voice almost inaudible. The millionaire approached and crouched down in front of her, trying to appear less intimidating. "It's my home, and I'd like you to stay here for a while, to help me understand what happened." The girl squeezed Felix's hand tighter, clearly distrustful. The elderly woman interjected, "It's going to be all right, little one. This man wants to help find your friend." The millionaire noticed how the old woman had avoided directly mentioning his wife. Was there also some shared secret there? "You are also welcome to stay," he offered. The elderly woman shook her head. "I have others who depend on me on the streets, but I'll come visit her." She turned to the girl, caressing her hair. "Be brave and remember what she taught you." After the woman left, the housekeeper took the girl to see the room prepared especially for her. The millionaire and Felix remained in the study, planning their next steps. "Did you get any more information?" About Havenbrook Institute? The millionaire asked. Felix placed a thin folder on the desk. It's an institution with a high reputation, apparently. Treats mental disorders, substance abuse, psychological traumas. Client base exclusively of high net worth individuals. Absolute discretion is their motto. He paused significantly, perhaps too discreet. I managed to access some blueprints of the place. There's an area in the basement that isn't on any official records. The millionaire flipped through the documentation, pausing on a particular photograph. The director of the institute next to his brother-in-law at a charity gala held the previous year. They know each other, he murmured. More than that, Felix added. They are partners in a venture in the Cayman Islands, a shell corporation from what I could gather. A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. The housekeeper entered, looking slightly disturbed. Sir, the girl is asking for paper and crayons. She says she needs to show you something important. In the decorated room, the girl sat on the soft rug, ignoring the bed and the luxurious furniture. She picked up the drawing materials offered with surprising familiarity and immediately began to work, her tongue peeking out from the corner of her mouth in absolute concentration. The millionaire watched in silence, fascinated by the transformation. The frightened and shy child of moments ago now moved her hand with precision across the paper, creating shapes and colors with a remarkable skill for her age. After almost 20 minutes, she held up the drawing. Here, this is where they took her. The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine. The drawing showed a white building with small windows surrounded by trees. In the lower corner, a dark door led to stairs that descended into an underground space. There, a female figure was lying on a bed, surrounded by people in white. In a disturbingly precise detail, a blue spot, the sapphire necklace, was drawn on the woman's neck. "How did you see this?" he asked, his voice choked. The girl lowered her eyes. "I followed the car. I hid behind the trees. I saw when they took her down there." Her small fingers traced the outline of the door in the drawing. "She saw me through the small window. She asked me to run. Then a man with a gold watch appeared and closed everything." The gold watch. The same one his brother-in-law flaunted on every occasion. "Can you draw this man?" The girl nodded and quickly produced another drawing. The portrait, although simple, was unmistakably the face of his brother-in-law. The millionaire felt an icy fury building inside him. "And this," the girl continued, producing a third drawing, "is what she gave me before." It was a representation of a necklace, not the sapphire one that everyone knew, but another with a key-shaped pendant. She said it would unlock the truth when the time was right. The millionaire's eyes widened in recognition. He knew that necklace. It was kept in the safe in his walk-in closet, along with other jewels that he considered more sentimental than financial in value. His wife rarely wore it. She said it was a family heirloom, too important to be flaunted. He stood up abruptly. "Stay here. I'll be back in a moment." In the master bedroom, he opened the safe built into the wall. Among the velvet boxes containing diamonds and rubies, he found the simple case that held the necklace with the key-shaped pendant. But upon opening it, a surprising discovery. The pendant was in fact a small, functional key. What would it open? What truth had his wife hidden? He returned to the girl's room, finding her now focused on a new drawing, more complex, more somber. It showed Havenbrook Institute seen from an aerial perspective, with impressive details of the external and some internal areas. "How do you know so much about this place?" he questioned, intrigued. The girl looked up, a shadow of old pain crossing her young gaze. "Because I've been inside," she replied simply. "That's where she found me the first time." The girl's revelation opened a door to a past that the millionaire knew nothing about. Sitting on the soft rug in the nursery, surrounded by scattered drawings, the child began to share fragments of her story, a puzzle that, little by little, revealed a disturbing picture. "I used to live there, in the White Place," she explained, tracing with her finger the outline of Havenbrook Institute in her drawing, "with other children, but we weren't allowed to talk to each other or play. It was forbidden." The millionaire listened attentively, trying not to show the horror that he felt growing inside him. What kind of institution would keep children in such conditions? "The doctors said I was special. They did tests, lots of tests." The girl visibly shuddered at the memory. "They asked about what I saw, about the people who weren't there, but I could see." "What people?" he asked gently. The child shifted uncomfortably. "People who are gone, who don't live anymore." She looked up, staring directly at him. "Like the lady who was standing in the corner of your room last night, with white hair. She was smiling at you." A chill ran down the millionaire's spine. The description corresponded exactly to his grandmother, who had passed away more than 2 decades ago, the woman who had raised him after the premature death of his parents. "One day," continued the girl, seemingly oblivious to the effect of her words, "she came. Your wife. She was with the man with the gold watch. They didn't see. Me watching. She was crying. She said it was wrong, that it needed to stop." "Stop what?" the millionaire asked, feeling his heart race. "The experiments with the special children." The girl picked up a red crayon and began to color the institute's basement in her drawing. "After that," she started, "visiting me alone. She brought chocolates and books. She taught me to draw. She said she would get me out of there someday." The millionaire struggled to process this information. His wife, apparently, had discovered some kind of questionable operation at the institute, possibly experiments with children who demonstrated unusual abilities, such as the apparent psychic ability of the girl in front of him. "And how did you get out of there?" he asked. "She got me out on a rainy night," the girl replied, now drawing blue drops falling on the institute. "She said it was dangerous, that we needed to be quick. She gave me a coat too big for me and took me through a back door. A car was waiting for us." The millionaire watched as the child's expression softened as she recalled that moment. The escape, the promise of freedom. It was clear that his wife had become a figure of salvation for the little girl. "Where did she take you?" "To the elderly woman. She said it was safe, that no one would look for us there." The girl stopped drawing, hugging her knees against her chest. "She came to see me whenever she could. She brought food, clothes, medicine when I got sick. She said she would soon have a better plan, a place just for us." A disturbing idea began to form in the millionaire's mind. His wife's dedication to this child seemed to go beyond simple compassion. There was a deeper connection, a bond that he could not yet understand. "Did she tell you why she cared so much about you?" The girl hesitated, her gaze drifting to a distant point beyond the window. When she spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. "Not at first, but the last time..." Tears began to form in her large eyes. "She said I was her." The sentence hung in the air, interrupted by the sound of the millionaire's phone. He answered with irritation, but his expression changed as he heard Felix's urgent voice. "Mr. Sterling, I got an informant inside the institute. There's something you need to see immediately." The millionaire looked at the girl, who was now dedicated to a new drawing, apparently lost in her memories. "Stay with her," he instructed the housekeeper, who remained discreetly in the corner of the room. "Don't leave her alone under any circumstances." Already in the car, on his way to meet Felix, he could not dismiss the implications of what the girl had been about to reveal. She said I was her what? Friend? Protector? Or something much deeper and more personal? And above all, Why would his wife keep such a secret? What had led her to conceal not only her visits to a vulnerable child, but apparently an entire part of her life that he had never suspected existed? The meeting place was an abandoned parking lot on the outskirts of the city. Felix was waiting next to his discreet car, accompanied by a middle-aged man wearing a security uniform, the informant from Havenbrook Institute. "This is Hector," Felix introduced when the millionaire got out of his limousine. "He's been working in security at the Institute for 8 years, monitoring sector." The man seemed nervous, his eyes constantly checking the surroundings, his restless hands rubbing against each other. "I showed him a picture of your wife," Felix continued. "He recognized her immediately." "She frequented the Institute regularly," confirmed Hector, his voice low and hoarse. "Initially as a patient for insomnia treatment, then as a volunteer in the art therapy program for children." "What children?" questioned the millionaire. Hector hesitated, looking at Felix as if seeking permission to continue. The investigator nodded encouragingly. "Special children with unusual abilities. The Institute maintains a secret program to study them, some orphans, others handed over by their own families, unable to cope with their peculiarities." The millionaire felt his stomach churn. The idea of children being used as guinea pigs for scientific experiments was repulsive. "And what was my wife's connection to this program?" "At first, she didn't know. She just offered art activities as a volunteer in the official pediatric wing." Hector shrugged. Then one of the children, a little girl with an extraordinary talent for drawing, started showing her disturbing images, scenes from the basement, from the experiments, things she shouldn't have known. "The girl who's with me now," the millionaire murmured, more to himself than to the others. "Your wife started investigating," Hector continued. "She discovered documents, accessed restricted areas using her brother's credentials. He's an investor in the Institute." He paused, swallowing hard, and then she discovered the truth about the girl. "What truth?" The question came as a tense whisper from the millionaire's lips. Hector looked at Felix, who handed an envelope to his boss. "I found these in the Institute's digital files," the informant explained. "They're highly confidential. Your wife managed to access them shortly before disappearing." With trembling fingers, the millionaire opened the envelope. Inside were copies of medical documents, DNA test results, and most disturbingly, a birth certificate. The mother's name made his heart stop for a moment. It was his wife. The date of birth indicated 7 years ago. The father's name was blank. She had a daughter? The millionaire's voice failed, unable to process the magnitude of that revelation. "It was before she met you," Hector clarified quickly. "From what I gathered from the records, she gave the child up for adoption shortly after birth. She was alone, scared, unable to raise a daughter. But how did the girl end up at the Institute?" The adoption agency had connections with the Institute. When the child began to demonstrate unusual abilities, visions, knowledge impossible for her age, she was transferred to the special program. Hector paused significantly. "Your wife didn't know this until she found the girl years later. As a volunteer, it was an instinctive recognition from what I was told. And then she secretly requested the DNA tests to confirm." The millionaire felt stunned. A daughter. His wife had a daughter she had never mentioned, a child who had been subjected to experiments, who had lived on the streets, the girl with eyes so like hers. Now everything began to make sense. "The discovery changed everything," Hector continued. "Your wife started planning how to get the girl out of there. She eventually succeeded with the help of a compassionate nurse. She hid her in the outskirts with a trusted woman while gathering courage and evidence to expose the whole scheme." "And why didn't she tell me?" questioned the millionaire, the pain of betrayal mixing with the shock of discovery. Because your brother-in-law was involved up to his neck, Felix replied, intervening for the first time. He's one of the main financiers of the secret program. They used the family fortune to establish the Institute as a front for questionable experiments. Hector nodded gravely. When she gathered enough evidence and threatened to expose everything, your brother-in-law acted. They forged a diagnosis of psychotic break, claiming she was having delusions about a non-existent daughter, about imaginary experiments. They used her own medical record of treatment for insomnia against her, and they had her committed, concluded the millionaire, the fury growing inside him like a storm, in the same institute where they kept the children. In the underground wing, confirmed Hector, isolated, sedated. Meanwhile, your brother-in-law orchestrated the fake accident, the funeral, all to silence her permanently and take control of her share of the company through the family's inheritance rights. Where is she now? The millionaire's voice was icy, controlled, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made Hector take a step back. Still there, room S17 on the 3rd level of the basement. The security guard pulled a magnetic card from his pocket. This gives you access, but it's personal, coded, only works with my fingerprints. Then you're coming with us, declared the millionaire, already moving towards the car. Felix, prepare everything. We're going tonight. Mr. Sterling, the investigator warned, we need to be cautious. Your brother-in-law has powerful connections. If they suspect anything... My wife is alive, interrupted the millionaire, his determination unwavering. Locked in a basement, being drugged while I believe I'm a widower. And there in my house is a girl, my stepdaughter, who has lived through hell for years. His eyes met Felix's with an intensity that did not admit questioning. I won't wait another day. As he drove back to the mansion to prepare for the nighttime rescue, a crystalline truth formed in his mind. His entire life had been built on secrets and lies. The wife he thought he knew so well carried a hidden past. The family he had trusted had orchestrated a monumental betrayal. And perhaps most surprising, in just a few days, a little unknown girl had turned his world upside down, making him question everything he believed in, forcing him to see truths that had always been before his eyes. The rain fell softly on Havenbrook Institute, creating a nebulous veil that merged with the darkness of the night. From inside the car, parked at a safe distance, the millionaire watched the imposing structure with his penetrating eyes. What had once seemed a respectable mental health clinic now revealed itself as a fortress of dark secrets. The security. Cameras on the east perimeter will be deactivated in exactly 3 minutes, informed Hector, consulting his watch. I created a glitch in the system that will look like a power outage caused by the rain. We'll have 20 minutes before the emergency generator restarts the circuit. Felix checked his weapon discreetly, a precaution that the millionaire had insisted on, despite hoping he wouldn't need to use it. What about the guards? The investigator questioned. 2 on the perimeter, 1 at the main entrance, 2 in the internal corridors, Hector responded methodically. At this hour, the medical staff is reduced. Just 1 doctor on duty and 2 nurses for the entire institute. The millionaire remained silent, his thoughts divided between the mission ahead and the image of the girl he had left at the mansion. Before leaving, he had gone to her room to say goodbye, finding her asleep over her drawings. He had watched. For a few moments, that small face, now clearly perceiving the similarities with his wife, the shape of the eyes, the delicate curve of the lips. How had he not noticed before? It's time, announced Hector, interrupting his thoughts. They moved silently through the rain, staying in the shadows. Hector's access card worked as promised, giving them entry through a rarely used side door. The interior of the institute was coldly aseptic. White walls, gleaming floors, the occasional landscape painting trying in vain to soften the clinical atmosphere. "This way," Hector indicated, guiding them down a corridor that ended in a service elevator disguised as a supply closet. This elevator is the only access to the lower levels besides the main entrance to the basement, which is heavily guarded. Inside the small elevator, the air seemed thin. The millionaire felt his heart hammering against his chest as he watched the inverted numbers light up sequentially. 1, 2, 3. The doors opened to a world completely different from the upper floor. Here, there was no pretense of normalcy. Narrow concrete corridors, dim lighting, metal doors numbered with small observation windows. It looked more like a maximum security prison than a medical institution. "S17 is at the end of this corridor," Hector whispered. "We have to pass the nursing station first." With skill born from years of infiltrating places where he wasn't. "Welcome," Felix led the way, moving like a shadow. At the nursing station, a single staff member was dozing over reports. Felix administered a mild sedative, ensuring she would remain asleep for a few hours. "She'll be all right," he assured, noticing the millionaire's look. The journey to room S17 seemed endless. Each step echoed painfully in the millionaire's ears. Each second increased his anxiety. What if the information was wrong? What if they arrived too late? What if his wife was no longer the same after so long, under the influence of drugs? Finally, they arrived. A metal door identical to the others, with the designation S17 painted in black. Hector swiped the card through the reader, pressed his thumb on the scanner, and the lock opened with a muffled click. The millionaire took a deep breath, preparing himself for what he would find beyond that door. With a decisive movement, he pushed it open. The room was small, more like a cell. A hospital bed occupied the center, surrounded by medical equipment that emitted constant beeps. And there, partially reclined on white pillows, was her. His heart skipped a beat. Even thinner, even with her hair lacking its usual shine, even with deep, dark circles under her eyes, it was her, his wife, alive. Her eyes were partially open, but unfocused, an obvious result of the medication. Upon perceiving movement at the door, they turned slowly in their direction. The millionaire approached with hesitant steps. "It's me," he whispered, taking her frail hand in his. For a terrible instant, there was no recognition in those eyes. Then, slowly, a spark of consciousness emerged from the drugged depths. Her dry lips moved, trying to form words. "The girl," she managed to articulate finally. "She's safe," the millionaire replied, feeling tears burning in his eyes. "She's home, our home." A slight squeeze of his hand was the response, weak but determined. "We need to move her now," urged Felix, remaining vigilant at the door. "Time is running out." Disconnecting the medical equipment was a tense process. Hector, with basic knowledge of the procedures, guided them to avoid alarms. The millionaire wrapped his wife in a blanket, shocked at her lightness when he lifted her in his arms. "My daughter," she murmured against his chest, her voice choked with emotion and medication. "She found you." "Yes," he confirmed, squeezing her gently against him. "She brought me to you." The return through the corridor was even more tense than the arrival. Every shadow seemed a threat, every distant noise a warning of discovery. The elevator, when they finally reached it, seemed impossibly slow in its ascent. They were just a few feet from the exit when an alarm echoed through the walls of the institute. Red lights began to flash in the corridors. "Damn it!" cursed Hector. "They detected the inconsistency in the system earlier than expected." "Keep going," ordered Felix, drawing his weapon. "I'll cover the rear." A frantic run to the car, with the rain now falling more intensely, hindering visibility. The millionaire gently placed his wife in the back seat, covering her with extra coats to combat the tremors that were beginning to overcome her as the effects of adrenaline momentarily overcame the sedatives. Felix and Hector emerged seconds later, running towards the vehicle. "Go!" shouted Felix. "Guards mobilized on the perimeter!" The engine roared to life, and the car sped off, launching cascades of water from the puddles on the asphalt. Through the rearview mirror, the millionaire saw lights turning on throughout the institute, figures running, a security vehicle starting to move. "They'll come after us," stated Hector, his voice tense, "and your brother-in-law will be informed immediately." "Let them come," replied the millionaire, a fierce determination in his voice as he held his wife's hand. "I'm ready for them now." During the ride to the mansion, she floated between consciousness and drowsiness, occasionally murmuring disjointed words. Mentions of the daughter, the hidden documents, a notebook with all the evidence. "She needs medical attention," observed Felix, looking at her through the rearview mirror. "Not a hospital," said the millionaire. "We can't risk it. I've already contacted Dr. Larson. He's waiting for us at the mansion. He has my complete trust." When they finally arrived, the mansion was silent and dark, except for a few strategic lights. The doctor, as promised, waited discreetly, bringing with him equipment and medications. The priority was to stabilize his wife, slowly reducing the sedatives in her system while monitoring her vital functions. The millionaire remained by her side throughout the process, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement. It was almost dawn when the housekeeper appeared at the door of the room, hesitant. "Mr. Sterling, forgive the interruption, but the girl is awake. She knows. I don't know how, but she knows her mother is here. She's very agitated, begging to see her." The millionaire looked at his wife, now sleeping more naturally, her face beginning to regain some color. Then he nodded. "Bring her here." The girl entered the room like a small hurricane, stopping abruptly upon seeing the figure in the bed, her large eyes filled with tears, her small body trembling visibly with contained emotion. "Mommy," she whispered, the word carrying the weight of years of separation, of dreams, of almost lost hope. The millionaire gently lifted her, placing her on the edge of the bed. Small fingers touched the sleeping woman's face with reverence, as if fearing she might dissolve at the touch. In that instant, his wife's eyes opened, clearer now, more conscious. Upon seeing the girl, a sob escaped her lips. Weak arms rose, enveloping the child in a clumsy but desperately loving embrace. "My little one," she murmured through tears. "You did it. You found help." The millionaire watched the scene, a storm of emotions washing over him. This was his family now, built not by the blood they shared with him, but by the truth that had been revealed, by the suffering they had faced, by the connection that was beginning to form between them. But as he contemplated that moment of reunion, he knew that the battle was only just beginning. Out there, a powerful man had just discovered that his elaborate plan had been dismantled, and he wouldn't give up easily. The morning brought with it not only sunlight, but also the storm that the millionaire knew was inevitable. His phone didn't stop ringing. Corporate lawyers, board members, his brother-in-law himself, leaving increasingly threatening messages. "He's mobilizing forces," informed Felix, who was monitoring the situation through his contacts. "He's filed court orders claiming you've kidnapped a mentally unstable patient. He's trying to convince the authorities that your wife suffers from severe psychotic delusions and represents a danger to herself." The millionaire watched the scene in the master bedroom through the half-open door. His wife, now sitting in bed propped up with pillows, held a sketchbook while the girl worked intently, creating new colorful images. Despite the pallor and obvious weakness, there was a growing vitality in her eyes, a determination that the sedatives had not been able to completely extinguish. "What about Hector?" he asked, turning his attention back to Felix. He's disappeared, as planned. He's in a safe location with all the documents he managed to extract from the Institute's system. He's preparing a deposition with the lawyer we provided. The millionaire nodded, his mind working quickly, considering all the possibilities, all the angles of attack and defense. We need to act first, he decided, before he has a chance to solidify his version of the story. He entered the room, approaching the bed. His wife looked up, a fragile but genuine smile illuminating her exhausted face. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting down delicately on the edge of the mattress. "Stronger with each hour," she replied, her voice still hoarse from disuse. "The medications are leaving my system. My mind is clearer." The girl held up her most recent drawing, a colorful representation of the three of them together in a sunny garden. It wasn't just an ordinary children's drawing. There was an almost prophetic quality to the image, a window to a possible future that everyone there deeply desired. "We need to talk about what we're going to do," said the millionaire, keeping his voice calm despite the urgency he felt. "Your brother won't give up easily." The wife closed her eyes for a moment, a shadow of pain crossing her face. "My own brother," she murmured. "Sometimes I still can't believe it." "Why did he do this?" asked the millionaire, the question that had been consuming him for days. She held her daughter's hand, as if seeking strength in the connection. Money, power, the usual motives. She paused, gathering the memories that were gradually returning to her consciousness. "When I discovered that the girl at the Institute was my daughter, the daughter I gave up for adoption before I met you, I started investigating how she had ended up there. The trail led me directly to him." "He knew about her from the beginning?" "Yes, I trusted him at the time. I was alone, scared, without resources. He was the one who arranged the adoption, promising that she would go to a loving family." Her voice faltered. "But when she started to demonstrate special abilities, he directed her to the Institute. The secret program they maintain in the basement is funded by powerful investors interested in paranormal phenomena, especially as manifested in children whose minds are more receptive." The girl continued drawing, apparently absorbed in her art, but the millionaire noticed how her small shoulders tensed as she heard the conversation. She understood much more than her age suggested. "When I discovered everything," continued the wife, "I threatened to expose the whole scheme. That's when I realized how deeply involved he was." Her eyes met her husband's, and how far he would go to silence me. "He won't touch you again," affirmed the millionaire, an unwavering conviction in his voice. "But we need to act strategically. He has influence, connections, and we have the truth," she replied, indicating the girl with a gentle gesture, "and evidence." As if responding to a cue, the child dropped her crayon and slipped off the bed. She went to a small decorative chest at the end of the room, an ornamental item that the millionaire barely noticed on a daily basis. With nimble fingers, the girl removed the false bottom of the object, revealing a secret compartment. "She showed me," explained the wife, before the surprised gaze of her husband. "The last time I was here, before everything, we created this hiding place together." From the compartment, the girl retrieved a USB drive and a thin black notebook. She handed them to the millionaire with the solemnity of someone who perfectly understands the value of those items. "Records of all the children who have passed through the program," explained the wife. "Names of investors, experiment protocols, financial transfers. I copied everything before they caught me." The millionaire examined the contents with growing admiration for his wife's courage and foresight. That information in the right hands would not only destroy her brother, but the entire criminal scheme of the Institute. "Connections to politicians, judges, businessmen," he observed, leafing through the meticulously organized notebook. "A scheme of alarming proportions." That's why he was so desperate to silence me permanently, she concluded, and to control my share of the company. With the combined resources, he could continue expanding the operation, influencing authorities, keeping everything in the shadows. The millionaire's phone vibrated again. A message from Felix. Institute lawyers arriving at the main gate with court officers. They claim to have a warrant for forced psychiatric evaluation of your wife. It was the move they had been expecting, but still the reality of the situation made his heart race. They were cornered in the mansion, with his wife still too weak to face any public confrontation. It was then that the girl approached, touching his arm to get his attention. In her new drawing, a surprisingly detailed scene, reporters with cameras, flashing lights, microphones pointed. In the center, the three figures representing themselves, united, facing the world. The millionaire looked from the illustration to the child, then to his wife. "She always knows what's coming next," said his wife with a weak smile. In that instant, a sudden clarity took hold of the millionaire. They had been remaining defensive, reacting to the opponent's moves. It was time to change the strategy. "Are you strong enough to stand for a few minutes?" he asked his wife. "With support?" She nodded, confused. "I think so. Why?" "Because we're not going to run." His gaze moved between his wife and her daughter. No, their daughter now, in every way that mattered. "We're going to face them, on our terms." He took his phone and made 3 quick calls. The first to his most aggressive and trusted lawyer. The second to a federal prosecutor who owed him considerable favors. The third to Linda Chen, the most respected and relentless investigative journalist in the country. "Bring the court officers inside," he instructed Felix by phone, "and inform the reporters at the gate that we'll have a statement in 15 minutes, all of them." The wife watched him with a mixture of surprise and admiration, gradually understanding the plan that was taking shape. "Are you sure?" she asked, the concern evident in her voice. "Once we do this, there's no turning back," he completed, holding her hand. "That's exactly the point. Your brother wants to keep us in the shadows, silently manipulating the system. We're going to bring him into the light, all of them." The girl smiled for the first time since arriving at the mansion. A small but luminous smile that completely transformed her face. She approached her mother, nestling carefully beside her, and then extended her hand to the millionaire, a silent invitation to complete the circle. When the court officers and the Institute's lawyers entered the imposing hall of the mansion minutes later, they didn't find frightened fugitives, but a united family waiting for them in the main living room. The wife, still pale but visibly lucid, sitting in an elegant chair with her daughter beside her. The millionaire standing, imposing and unwavering. And, more surprisingly, cameras from various news networks positioned strategically, broadcasting live. "Gentlemen," the millionaire greeted with an icy calm, "I imagine you're here to take my wife back to the illegal captivity where they held her under drugs after forging her death. Unfortunately for you, the whole world is watching now." Chapter 9: The Truth Revealed. The next 48 hours unfolded like a media hurricane that swept through the city. The image of the millionaire's wife, officially declared dead weeks before, now alive, recounting her captivity on national television, created the kind of scandal that no money or influence could quell. Linda Chen, the investigative journalist, whom the millionaire had contacted, turned the evidence gathered into a series of devastating reports. Havenbrook Institute, formerly a symbol of medical excellence, now had its entrails exposed. The secret research program with special children, the forced commitments, the corruption scheme that extended across multiple spheres of power. Authorities have just confirmed the arrest of the director of Havenbrook Institute and 3 senior physicians, announced the morning news anchor that the millionaire was watching in his office. Meanwhile, pressure is growing for a full federal Investigation into allegations of illegal experimentation on minors. Felix entered silently, bringing the latest edition of the newspaper. The headline couldn't be clearer. Havenbrook scandal. Businessman fakes sister's death to take over financial empire. Your brother-in-law's on the run, informed the investigator, placing the newspaper on the desk. Accounts frozen, passport cancelled. It's a matter of time. The millionaire nodded, satisfied with the unfolding of events, but his mind was already beyond revenge. He thought of the children. How many, like his stepdaughter, had passed through the institute? How many were still lost in the system, with no one to look for them? Any news about the files? He asked. The prosecution team is cross-referencing the data, replied Felix. They've already identified 17 children who passed through the program in the last 5 years. 7 remain missing. A knot formed in the millionaire's throat. 7 children, 7 lives adrift, possibly still suffering. I want to find them, he declared firmly. All of them. Felix smiled slightly, as if he already expected that reaction. We already have a team mobilized. The best private investigators, social workers, pediatric psychologists. A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. The housekeeper announced that the wife was awake and asking for him. In recent days, her recovery had been remarkable. Each hour away from the sedatives brought back more of her strength and mental clarity. He found her in the sunroom, sitting in a wicker chair, watching the girl who was playing with colored blocks on the rug in front. The scene was one of almost surreal normalcy after everything they had been through. How are you feeling today? He asked, kissing her forehead softly. Stronger, she replied, her eyes brighter than the day before. Dr. Larson says there's no permanent damage. I'll just need time. The millionaire sat down beside her, observing in silence the girl who was now building an elaborate structure. With the blocks, her concentration absolute, her small fingers moving with surprising precision. She's extraordinary, he commented, unable to hide the admiration in his voice. The wife smiled, a mixture of pride and sadness in her gaze. Yes, she always has been. Even before... Her voice faltered for a moment. Even before manifesting. Her gifts, that's why they wanted her so badly. Her sensitivity, her perception of the world, goes beyond what we can understand. The millionaire hesitated, the question that had been circling his thoughts finally finding voice. Why did you never tell me about her? She looked away, fixing her gaze on the trees beyond the window. Fear. Shame. A deep sigh escaped her. When we met, I was rebuilding my life after giving her up for adoption. It was a decision that tore me apart daily, but I believed it was the best thing for her, to have a stable family, opportunities I couldn't offer as a college dropout who'd been disowned. She paused, gathering her memories. Then you walked into my life, so secure, so established. I was afraid that if you knew about my past, about the daughter I'd given up, your image of me would change forever. The CEO took her hand in his. And when you found her again? At the institute? It was like the universe was mocking me, she replied, silent tears starting to stream down her face. Fate brought my daughter back, but in such terrible circumstances. I found out my own brother had manipulated everything, steering her to that horrible place when her gifts started to manifest. Her voice hardened. I'll never forgive him for that. What happened then? I planned carefully. I managed to get her out of the institute with inside help, hid her with a trusted friend while I gathered evidence. I intended to tell you everything. But she swallowed hard. I was careless. My brother found out. And you know the rest. The CEO gazed at the child playing, seemingly oblivious to the adult's conversation, although he suspected she absorbed every word, every unspoken emotion. And now, he asked finally, what happens to us? His wife turned to him, raw vulnerability in her eyes. That depends on you. I would completely understand if, after all these lies and secrets." He gently placed a finger over her lips, silencing her. "During that funeral, as I watched the casket that I believed contained your body, I realized something I had never fully admitted. All the money, all the power, all the empires I built meant absolutely nothing without you." His eyes moved to the little girl. "And now, inexplicably, I've gained not only my wife back, but also a daughter who has already captured my heart with her extraordinary courage." He felt a small hand touch his knee and discovered the girl now standing before him, offering him a red block. "For our house," she explained, pointing to the structure she had built, a surprisingly sophisticated representation of the mansion. "This one's missing to make it complete." The CEO accepted the block, understanding the profound symbolism of the gesture. Carefully, he placed it on top of the structure, completing the little world she had created. "Perfect," declared the girl, satisfied, turning then to her mother. "Can we stay here now, forever?" The wife looked at her husband, the silent question echoing in her eyes. "Yes," he replied, feeling an absolute certainty settle in his heart. "This is our home, the three of us, forever." And at that moment, he understood that the tragedy he had believed to be the end of his life had transformed, through the courage of a little girl, into the true beginning. No longer the lonely, work-obsessed CEO, but a man with purpose, with a family to protect and love. And as he watched the two figures before him, the wife he had almost lost, the daughter he never knew he needed, he knew with crystal clarity what the next phase of his life would be. Not just justice for his family, but for all children like his stepdaughter, for all families torn apart by greed and corruption. The financial empire he had built would now have a new purpose, and the girl who had arrived barefoot in his darkest moment would be the light guiding the way. 6 months had passed since the events that shook the foundations of the CEO's life. Autumn had arrived again, painting the trees of the mansion's extensive grounds in shades of gold and red. From the window of his office, he watched his wife and the girl walking among the fallen leaves, collecting the most beautiful ones for an art project they were developing together. The transformation in both was visible even from a distance. His wife had regained not only her physical strength, but also that spark of life that had always characterized her. The girl, once shy and frightened, now ran freely, her crystalline, laughter occasionally reaching him through the half-open window. The office door opened and Felix entered, carrying a discreet folder. "We found the last one," he announced, placing the folder on the desk. "Daniela, 9 years old. She was in a foster home near the Mexican border, registered under another name." The CEO opened the folder, finding the photograph of a girl with dark eyes and an expression too serious for her age. The 7th and last of the children who disappeared from the Havenbrook Institute. "How is she?" "Scared. Distrustful. Much like the others when we found them," Felix replied. "But the team of psychologists is already working with her. The foundation will ensure she receives all the necessary care. The foundation, the entity that the CEO had created with a massive endowment from his personal fortune, dedicated to finding and rehabilitating children who were victims of institutional abuse, especially those with special needs or unusual abilities. In just 6 months, it had become a powerful force for transformation, attracting dedicated professionals and establishing new standards of care. "What about her uncle?" he asked, closing the folder. Felix allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. "Arrested last night trying to cross the Canadian border with false documents. No resources, no allies. Everyone abandoned him when the evidence became irrefutable." The CEO nodded silently. There was no joy in the fall of the man he had once considered family, only a sense of justice finally being served. "The DA expects your cooperation in the testimony," continued Felix, but it's just a formality. The case is practically closed. Outside, the sound of laughter increased. The CEO stood up, approaching the window. His wife had just thrown a handful of leaves at the girl, who was now trying to retaliate, both laughing without restraint. "Felix," he called, without taking his eyes off the scene. "Schedule a meeting with the adoption lawyers. It's time to make it official." Felix smiled, understanding immediately. "It will be a pleasure, sir." When he was alone again, the CEO reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this moment. The unbearable pain of loss transformed into the miracle of reunion. The dark secrets revealed. The small hand that had grabbed his, that rainy day in the cemetery, changing the course of 3 lives forever. Hours later, as the sun was setting on the horizon, the family gathered in the living room. The girl proudly showed off her latest drawing, a depiction of the 7 rescued children, all holding hands in a circle. "They're going to be okay now," she declared, with the peculiar certainty she often demonstrated. "Like us." The CEO exchanged a look with his wife, feeling the weight of that simple statement. Slowly, he knelt before the child, getting down to her eye level. "I have something important to ask you," he said, his voice soft but serious. "Would you like to officially become our daughter? Not just in our hearts, as you already are, but also in the eyes of the law?" The girl's eyes widened, shining with an emotion so pure it almost hurt to behold. "I would be your real daughter." "You already are," he replied, feeling his own voice choked with emotion. "But yes, it would be official. Forever." Small arms wrapped around his neck in a tight hug. He felt his wife join them, completing the family circle that until a few months ago had seemed like an impossible dream. That night, after the girl finally fell asleep, exhausted from so much emotion, the couple remained in her room for a few moments, watching her peaceful sleep. "I thought I had lost everything," the CEO confessed in a low voice, "when I believed you were gone. And now we have more than we ever imagined," she completed, resting her head on his shoulder. "How can we deserve so much happiness after so much pain?" She smiled, that smile that had always captivated him, even in the darkest times. "Maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's just about accepting the gifts that the universe offers us, especially when they come from the most unexpected sources." Her gaze returned to the sleeping child. A little messenger of truth, in rags and barefoot. Nay. The next day, while signing the official adoption papers in his office, the CEO found a small drawing placed between the legal pages. It showed 3 figures holding hands, a tall one in a suit, a medium one with long hair, and a small one in the middle. Above them, in colorful childlike letters, a single word: family. He carefully kept the drawing in his wallet, where it would remain for years to come, as a constant reminder that true wealth could not be measured in bank accounts or corporate empires. It was in the bonds forged through pain and redemption, in the love that emerged from the deepest shadows, in the voice of a child who had refused to remain silent. The man who had once defined his worth by the power he wielded over markets and industries now found a higher purpose in the simple joy of seeing his daughter blossom, his wife regain her strength, and the children rescued by the foundation gradually rebuild their interrupted lives. That same afternoon, as the family walked through the mansion's garden, the rain began to fall softly, no longer a symbol of mourning and loss, but a gentle blessing on the new beginning they had achieved together. The girl raised her face to the falling drops, smiling with pure joy. "It's like happy tears from the sky," she declared, reaching out her hands to feel the rain on her palms. The CEO and his wife exchanged a look of deep understanding. The same clouds that once wept over an empty casket now blessed a family reborn from the ashes of lies and betrayal. And so, under the soft autumn rain, the man who controlled empires discovered the true source of power, the unconditional love of a child who had seen the truth when everyone else was blind, who had spoken when the whole world remained silent, and who had brought light to the darkness with nothing but the strength of her extraordinary heart. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the CEO's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special.